Before we begin, a quick word. If this channel can get to 5,000 subscribers by July, I will make a video talking about the Kingdom Keepers book series. So if you want to see that, make sure you're subscribed. Thank you so much, and please enjoy the video. Hello, and welcome back to Short Spotlight, the series where we talk about Disney animated short films. Old and new, obscure and famous, big and small. If there's a studio that's just as famous for their short films as they are for their features, it's Pixar. While I usually try to stick to just core Disney on this channel, it only feels fair to include Pixar shorts in this series, because a lot of them are just as well known and beloved as their feature films. And today we'll be talking about one of their more recent efforts, Bao. Bao is a landmark in many ways. It was a huge leap forward in representation at Pixar, both in front of and behind the camera, and it represents a recent shift at the company towards creator-driven projects. A welcome one in my opinion. And as Pixar has continued to put out quality films, I feel like this got lost in the shuffle and didn't get as much attention as it deserved. Which is why we're here to talk about it today. Since Bao is a creator-driven short, it only seems fair to start by talking about its director. Domee Shi joined Pixar in 2011 and has worked on many of their major films since. Her credits include films like Inside Out, The Incredibles 2, and Toy Story 4. But her most recent and best-known work to date is Turning Red, of which she was the director, making her the first woman at Pixar to solo direct a film, and the first woman of color to do so entirely. Which is pretty huge, especially if you know anything about that studio's history. Inspiration for the cartoon came from two sources: her love of food and her relationship with her mother. Said she, "I wanted to explore the relationship between an overprotective parent and a child, and I love food and watching shows like Top Chef. You see all of the effort and love and consideration put into making that food, and I wanted to see that in animated form." She also wanted to infuse the story with the Chinese culture that she grew up with. Pixar was actually at a recent spike of culturally diverse productions at the time. Films like Coco and Sanjay's Superhero Team were adding much needed diversity in the lineup. Not just on screen, but behind the camera as well. And it continues with films like Soul, Nona, Float, Out, 20-something, and again Turning Red. Which is a welcome change, if for nothing else, the new variety of stories that can be told. I'll take this over another Cars sequel any day of the week. In addition to her Chinese heritage, Domee Shi was also raised in Canada, and a lot of the locations in the film were based on real places in Toronto. When she pitched Bao, she was worried that it would be too culturally specific, but that ended up being the thing that got the executives at Pixar to greenlight it. Work began on the film in 2015, and it took roughly 3 or 4 years to complete. Bao premiered in front of The Incredibles 2 in 2018 to positive reviews. Pierre de Bruges of Variety wrote, "It's a brilliant example of what Pixar does best, grounding well-timed cartoon gags with well-earned emotional truths." Courtney Small of Cinema Access said of it, "Bao is a magnificent and touching film that will make you want to reconnect with your folks, preferably over a plate of dumplings." And James Ward for USA Today said, "The short film Bao is a sweet little tearjerker reminiscent of the opening scene of Up. You might even want to bring a box of Kleenexes along, just in case." The film took home the Academy Award for Best Animated Short in 2018, and as of writing, is the last Pixar animated short to be released theatrically, due to their shift to producing Spark shorts for streaming. Bao centers on a Chinese mother who's coping with a child that recently left home. While creating a bunch of Bao dumplings, she discovers that one of them is alive. Not just that, but it's a baby. So she decides to take it in and raise it as her own. The story sounds kind of ridiculous on paper, but like every good Pixar film, the execution is handled wonderfully. Without any dialogue and just through pantomime, we're able to see what the mother's feeling and empathize with her. I imagine that feeling is multiplied for any parents out there. Through the little dumpling, she's able to relive all of the little moments of parenting. The fact that it's specifically a bao bun has some extra brilliance to it. From what I've read, please don't get on me if this is wrong. The word bao in Chinese can mean precious treasure, just like what a child is. However, reliving that parenting also means the bao will want to leave too. And as it turns out, it left in the exact same manner her child left. It's a nice little twist and the reveal is well executed. It's similar to something like Finding Nemo, the story of a parent who eventually learns to let go and let their child grow up. And that ends up being the thing that brings them back together in the end. Again, she said the following: "I thought it would be a really cool exercise for me to put myself into the point of view of this mom. I guess to understand my own mom better. I'm an only child and I've been coddled and protected my whole life. But I wanted to understand, why did my mom always act this way? Why was she always so protective?" There's also a cultural factor to this story that I don't think should get overlooked. I can't speak on it personally, so I highly recommend you check out this article by Petrana Radalovic. There'll be a link in the description, please go read it. That's another aspect that made this cartoon unique, how representative it is of the Chinese diaspora. A lot of the people who worked on this film were of Chinese descent. Domi Shi is Chinese-Canadian, the composer Toby Shu is Chinese-American, as is the production designer Rona Liu. And thus, we get a lot of little details that are representative of that culture, like the toilet paper roll on the dining room table. The non-Asian animators at Pixar questioned why it was there, but it's a big staple around the houses of many Chinese immigrants. I've always been a big proponent of representation matters, so getting to see all of this from a major studio like Pixar was a real treat. Domi Shi's mother was even a dumpling consultant on the film, teaching a couple of classes on dumpling making to the animators. And it paid off. All of the little details like the flour on her hands or the little pieces of vegetable in the filling really pulls the cartoon together. In simpler terms, what Ratatouille did for French cuisine, Bao did for Chinese cuisine.
Food is super, super important in Chinese culture, but yeah, especially in my family. Food is how your parents show that they love you. They don't really say I love you with words. They say it through their actions. They say it through fussing over you, but also cooking for you, making sure you're always well fed. So what better way to tell this story of a Chinese family than with food as the center focus?
Unfortunately, I can't talk about this film without talking about the initial reaction to it. When it premiered in 2018, some audience members didn't pick up on the metaphor, one that I thought was pretty clear. Now, it's okay to not understand a piece of media when you first see it. That's not the problem. The problem came from the reaction to that confusion. Because when people were confused by Bao, they mocked it. It's kind of a microcosm of problems that I think a lot of Americans have with media literacy. Instead of trying to take the time to understand a story, they choose to mock it or dismiss it altogether. Which becomes even more of a problem when that story comes from a marginalized and underrepresented group of people. If you were on Twitter when Turning Red came out, you might have heard about this one critic who basically shrugged at the movie and said, "It's not for me," without any kind of further analysis. It's the same kind of thing here. I'm not gonna act like I'm immune to it. I've made fun of things that I didn't really understand. But it's something I'm trying to be more cognizant of. I think it's important to try to understand a piece of media on its own terms before dismissing it entirely. There's a moment near the end of the short that I think is a good example of it. The Bao Bun brings home a woman and wants to move out with her. The mother tries to get it to stop, and when that doesn't work, she eats it. I found a couple of reviewers who were confused by it, and even I'll admit that I didn't quite get it at first. But I found an analysis of it by Dr. Nancy Wen Yun, a sociologist and university professor, that puts it into perspective. To quote her, "There's this kind of suffocation, literally eating the bao. It's a metaphor for, I don't want you to leave. It's a bit of violence with love." So, the mother eating the bao is representative of how sometimes, if you'll excuse my phrasing, loving your child consumes someone so much that it ends up consuming them. So that goes to show how important it is not to dismiss things when you don't understand them. There could be a greater thesis that could make the film all the more meaningful. With all this discussion about culture and representation and metaphors and media literacy, I haven't even touched on the actual animation. It's Pixar animation at its highest level. All the little details with the food, the way the light hits the characters. I even love the chibi-esque character designs, and the way the Bao's design echoes the sun's design is a great touch. I also love this little moment here. I don't know why, it just cracks me up. And like any good animated film, the animation only enhanced the stories and themes. Bao is a wonderful cartoon. Not only is it a major leap forward in representation behind the camera, but it's just a wonderfully made film. It's heartwarming and moving in a way that only Pixar can accomplish, and you can tell how deeply personal it was to the filmmakers, which is something you don't always see in American animation. If this is what the future of Pixar will be like, I am excited. So check it out and see what you can learn for yourself. Would you like to help pick the next episode of this series? Then head over to my Patreon. You'll find a poll where you can vote on the next short covered in Short Spotlight. I've edited my tiers slightly, so now $1 patrons will get to vote on future videos. Be sure to check it out, and thanks for watching.